I think when people talk about broken Britain, they sort of have the justice system in mind, where nothing seems to be working and the wrong prisoners are being let out early and there are all sorts of cock-ups and mistakes. The justice system is certainly creaking.
I mean, we talk about NHS waiting lists. God, if we had operation waiting lists or elective waiting lists that were anything like this, I mean, the political crisis for this government in terms of health, which is already bad, would be on a whole nother level, right? But the fact is that for individuals who are caught up in it, it is life-destroying, potentially, because it just hangs over your life for years.
Runnymede, the 15th of June, 1215. King John seals the Magna Carta. In it, no free man will be imprisoned except by the lawful judgment of his peers. The 2nd of December, 2025, David Lammy tears it up. We've had jury trials for over 800 years. They are, as David Lammy himself once proudly asserted, fundamental to our justice system, fundamental to our democracy. They're a bulwark against tyranny. 12 ordinary citizens pooling their collective wisdom and experiences of the world. Take Lucy Connolly and Jamie Michael. After the Southport attack, these people of prior good character posted on social media. Look, their posts were wrong, but Jamie Michael, a veteran, appeared before a jury, and exercising their common sense, the jury acquitted him. Would Lucy Connolly really have been given 31 months if she too had appeared before a jury? Of course we need to fix the backlog in our courts. It is frankly shameful that serious cases are being listed as far off as 2030. But today, there are courtrooms sat empty across our country. And in the last year, if every courtroom had been filled, the backlog would have gone down by 5,000 to 10,000 cases. Instead, it's gone up. So David Lammy, trust ordinary people, preserve our ancient rights, get the court sitting round the clock.
It's John.
It's Emily.
It's Lewis.
And that was a video from Robert Jenrick where he's seen walking across a muddy field in white trainers with his dog. I mean, that's just the wrong look. I'm sorry.
Runnymede, maybe. Was he in Runnymede? Do you think?
It may have been Runnymede.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think it was just any old field.
But surely it should have been Wellies if you're going across a field.
I also love the idea that we reached a fundamentally sound and just legal system in 1215. Yeah. There was definitely no wrongful imprisonment after that for the next 800 years.
No rack, no torture.
No, indeed. But this is all related to the announcement that David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, has made today, which is controversial because, however comically Jenrick has expressed it, it is true to say that the jury system has been at the heart of the English, Scottish legal system for centuries, unlike many other European countries. But he's announced, David Lammy, that jury trials in England and Wales for crimes that carry a likely sentence of less than 3 years will be scrapped. These are reforms to the justice system, including creating so-called swift courts, and that will include serious offences, including murder, robbery and rape, will still go before a jury, but anything less than that will go either before magistrates or individual judges. And the context for this, Lammy argues, is the fact that, frankly, at the moment, our justice system is not working. A fundamental feature of any state, or a fundamental responsibility of any state, is the efficient and swift operation of justice, and it is not working. Indeed, at the moment, there are current projections that Crown Court case backlogs will reach 100,000 by 2028. That's against a current backlog of almost 78,000. And this means that currently a suspect being charged with an offence today may not reach trial until 2030.
What he says, what Jenrick says anyway, is that Lammy and indeed the Prime Minister have gone back on previous positions that they held and indeed that they articulated. He quotes the Prime Minister as having said a few years ago there should be a right to trial by jury in all criminal cases, and quoted Lammy as saying juries act as a filter for prejudice. In other words, Jenrick's accusation is he's scrapping the very justice system that he once lauded and trying to make it look like this was never in a manifesto, was never an idea that they had before they came to power. Now they've come into power, they've seen how slow the system is. The diagnosis is right, but the solution is wrong.
I think when people talk about broken Britain, they sort of have the justice system in mind where nothing seems to be working and the wrong prisoners are being let out early and there are all sorts of cock-ups and mistakes. The justice system is certainly creaking. But the point about sort of justice delayed is justice denied. There's someone I know who has been the victim of a stalker. The person who had been stalking her has now been charged with attempted rape. And the police came round to see this woman, a young woman, and said, look, he's going to plead not guilty. It means that the case will go to the Crown Court and a jury, but it will be years. And his barrister's thinking will be, if we delay this long enough, there is every possibility that the person who is accusing him will just think, I want to get on with my life. I don't want this hanging over me. I will, and the case will fall and the case will drop. And if that is a legal tactic now, that just play it long because the case will go away, then surely that has to be addressed. And for that reason, I kind of think that, people will get hooked on King John, Magna Carta, but I think there is a practical thing about our justice system now that needs
solves
addressing.
The problem. I mean, I don't think you'll find anyone who says, we need to lengthen the period of the wait between, the resolution of a crime and the crime taking place. The question is whether getting rid of a jury. I don't think jury selection takes that long. I don't think that is what's holding it up. As they've said to us, it's about the number of days that they're not even sitting. It's about the delays to the process. It's about things kind of stopping in a recess and having to be re-examined and sending everyone home. That's the time-consuming stuff. I don't think it takes very long to get a jury together.
Yeah, but Lammy was saying that they reckon that the Swift courts will be 20% quicker. So it will take 20% less time. To do it because of the legal representations where the jury is sent out because there's kind of arguments. If you look at what happens in a court case,
so that's then a magistrate, and a magistrate would have a maximum ability to give an 18-month sentence.
I think that what this is an example of is the government almost trying to pull any lever to lessen this problem. Because John, you are right. I mean, this is a profoundly serious crisis in the British state. One of the reasons it's been allowed to get this bad is because most people, thankfully, for one reason or another, do not encounter the justice system very much. It's a bit like the border force or something like that. Generally speaking, unlike frontline public services in that day-to-day way, like the NHS and so on, we don't encounter. I mean, we talk about NHS waiting lists. God, if we had operation waiting lists or elective waiting lists that were anything like this, I mean, the political crisis for this government in terms of health, which is already bad, would be on a whole nother level, right? But the fact is that for individuals who are caught up in it, it is life-destroying, potentially. Yeah. Either if you're a victim or someone who has been accused wrongly or correctly of a crime, it is basically destroys your life because it just hangs over your life for years. The question, therefore, becomes, as we're discussing, whether the changes to the jury system will be the sort of silver bullet to try and arrest it or to try and make it better. And I think what you can probably say is that it might make some differences around the edges. But if you look at the actual stats in terms of what's happened to the justice system, and the truth is, as the IFG Institute for Government have pointed out, justice system is now employing fewer criminal lawyers, pretty much than ever before on a per capita basis. The number of judges working in courts remains 7% smaller compared to 15 years ago. We're spending 10% less in real terms on the court system than we were 15 years ago. And if we're looking at, we're expecting magistrates to try and pick up more of this slack. Actually, the number of judges has gone down a bit, but there's been an absolute collapse in the number of magistrates since 2010. So if you're generally trying to funnel people away from, or cases away from from the jury part of the system, where are they going to go? So, I think that Jenrick can talk about Magna Carta as much as he likes. The truth is that, we can have a debate about the jury system. There is a debate about the jury system. We've changed it in the past. In the 1930s, as Lammy has pointed out, we used to have jury systems for civil trials. We don't anymore until the Tories themselves changed it in defamation cases. We had it till 2013. You can pick and choose without fundamentally changing our nature of a democracy where you employ a jury system. The question is whether it will make much of a material difference in terms of lessening the problem in the justice system overall.
I guess in my head, I'm trying to work out what is practical and what is theoretical in this whole question. I went to a few barristers to sort of gauge their response to Lammy's changes. And one sent me to his blog, The Secret Barrister, and he said juries are the worst way of determining criminal liability, except for all the others. In other words, it's the old Churchill quote about democracy. And he said, and I think this is the most fundamentally easy way of understanding it, that juries are important not for the powers they have, as for the powers they prevent others from having. In other words, this is a theoretical argument, and I sort of stand back from that and I'm just kind of looking at it. But the point of having a jury is that it means that prosecution can't simply be nodded through by a court. The evidence has to be impartial, it has to be evidential. It's taken out of the hands of career and legal professionals. In other words, just having that body of your peers is what gives you distance from, as it were, the legal system itself. So something that seems very obvious if you're a career barrister, if you're a career professional, if you're a lawyer, suddenly has to go through another check and balance. And I think that's the argument that the Jenricks of this world, the Michael Goves of this world make. I'm not pretending that I'm totally convinced by that, because I think we probably do need to modernise. And I think 1215 is probably not, as you said, the right starting point for whatever the system has given us. But I do understand that there is a sort of gut reaction to this, because people, you know I hate the slippery slope argument, but people see it as a way of giving more power to a smaller number of people and a more closed system than it currently has. And that's a worry.
And of course, if you look at, the sort of temples where the judges and the barristers gather, in London, representative, kind of up to a point. It's got better. But
I thought you were going to say up to a point, my lord.
Up to
Lord
a point,
Copper.
my lord.
I was
Lord
waiting
Copper.
for that.
But you can see that, overwhelmingly, it is white, it is male, it is middle class, it is drawn from the private schools.
It's older.
And that is so. But on the other hand, if you have got legal professionals adjudicating, do you want 12 good men and women true to be, the jury of your peers, to be judged by them when, there are all sorts of cases where they've gone on gut feeling but not on the law.
Almost every major miscarriage of justice has come from a jury trial. But that is probably because juries are involved in all the major trials.
Exactly. And
I don't know what you do with that.
And in other countries, as I say, this is very much a sort of English common law tradition to have juries. Most other European countries don't have them, apart from maybe in some specific cases. And I'm sure they have their miscarriages of justice as well. I mean, I think the problem is, John, is that, at least my sort of overall point here is that this is systemic, right? In the sense that, at least we can be guaranteed to get jurors. You have to do it. It's one of the only sort of parts of
We're free.
Yeah, we're only parts.
You,
exactly.
I think, are waiting to be called up as we speak.
I've been called for jury service.
Oh, I didn't know. This isn't just a theoretical discussion.
No.
You're going to be one of the 12 good men and women true.
I have been called for jury service.
One angry man.
Yeah.
John's wondering
calling
why they
people
don't next week, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, no, but exactly, the state can compel us to do it. It's one of the only things in our democracy we have to do. We don't have to vote.
It's not conscription.
We're not conscripted. We have to do it unless you've got a very, very good excuse. So, we are a plentiful resource. Actually within the criminal justice system right now, just try and get, if you can't afford your own barrister, try and get a criminal defence lawyer. The legal aid situation is so bad that actually now it is so, the sort of remuneration is so poor that actually the system itself is struggling to even get enough criminal defence lawyers to come in. Most solicitors in the country, criminal solicitors, are now over 55. It is an ailing, creaking system. And in that respect as well, a big part of the story here is that the justice system mirrors the rest of the public sector in not recovering or not getting close to recovering even pre-pandemic productivity levels. We see that in the NHS. I mean, for example, the IFS said the other day that the average number of cases resolved per sitting day in a Crown Court in 2019-20 was 1.16. So that's good, because if it's above 1, then you're getting through the backlog. But now it's 0.97. Now, you can work that out. If you're not above 1, then the backlog just keeps growing and growing and growing. And the jury system in particular, or changes to the jury system now, won't help that backlog in particular, because it would have to be retrospective, which would get everyone up in arms. The legal profession won't tolerate that, because a lot of these processes and these cases have already started. And you can't go back and say, well, we started with a jury type system and now we're changing, moving the goalposts halfway through.
To be fair to Lammy, this is the bit of his announcement that has got, all the focus, because it's a big constitutional question. But he is also, and he told us today in the Commons, £34 million of additional funding for criminal legal aid advocates, and he wants to match funding pupilages, in other words, make it more possible for people to study as barristers and increase the number of sitting days. So it's not that he is ignoring all the other stuff, which is, holding up the system and shows a lack of funding. I think he's trying to do them side by side. But obviously, the question about juries is the one that gets our attention, because it feels like a massive change. It feels like something slipping out of our grasp, even though, as you say, in the EU, we are the only country that routinely has juries. Oh, yeah. When did that happen? Why didn't nobody tell me? I don't understand.
She's gone back to 2016
rather than tell about the last 10 years.
Not 12, 15 at least. That's something. But I mean,
EU
in Europe, exactly. We are the only country, because the common law system, we share that with the US, with Canada, I guess Australia.
We gave it to him. Just share it.
I mean, I suppose kind of where I
gave them a bit.
Yeah. I suppose where I come down on this is, if this speeds things up, then it's good. But is it dealing with the fundamentals of what is wrong with the criminal justice system? And Lewis, you've kind of outlined, some of the problems that are there. Then no, it doesn't. I mean, okay, a 37 million here and extra pupilages and whatever else funding. I mean, that's all good.
No, that's boring, but it is important.
Yes, it is. It's boring, but it is important. But is it going to deal with kind of the crisis that we've got in our prisons, in the way our criminal justice system works, in the court backlog, in all of that?
If you listen to barristers or indeed people involved in trials, they'll say that one of the most just frustrating things about being involved in a case is just how analog the system is. Yeah. I mean, how so much of it appears still to be done on sort of pen and paper.
It's sort of banking hours, isn't it, from the 1970s?
Yeah, it feels, and having, from all the super injunction stuff we did, having had that for 2 years, I had some experience of that, and it is extraordinary. You're sort of sat there and you get there and everybody's been waiting for this particular hearing and been waiting for weeks and weeks and weeks. And you get there and it turns out that one, in this case, the government side, haven't sent all the right paperwork in as promised. And then you're sat there going, right, well, I suppose we'll have to go and get those. How long is that going to take? At least 3 hours, my lord. Right, well, we'll have to adjourn for lunch there. And, before you know where you are, you're kind of... everything's been deferred and delayed, and then you get to the end of the day and they say, right, we haven't really progressed, have we? And they say,
that is a bit like 12:15, isn't it?
Yeah. When can we come back? Oh, we haven't got another court hearing availability for 3 weeks. And so you can just see this stuff just kind of augments and gets bigger and bigger, and that that's one case, and then you multiply that out by hundreds and hundreds and thousands, and then you have a backlog.
So the question is whether this is, exactly to your point, is this a something must be done knee-jerk, or is it a clever way of actually starting to speed up the system? I don't think we know.
I just think what would be nice. I mean, I think clearly it's going to make some difference. I think that it's all very well for the defenders of the jury system to come out and start talking about the idea that sort of lamps of liberties are going to be extinguished and whatever, but you can't do that if you're the same people who have been in charge for the previous 14 years, who've allowed the system to go to rack and ruin, because that is what has happened. What has happened to our justice system is a national scandal.
I mean, let's end with Jenrick, because one of the things he said in the Commons today is, you've had 17 months to do this. Why haven't you done it before? You think, you had 14 years, mate, and you didn't do it.
This is that backlog. It's not a backlog that has accrued principally over the last 14 months, 17 months. It's a backlog that has accrued certainly since the pandemic and before that as well.
And austerity.
Yeah,
right
exactly.
through the 2010 years, yeah.
And we'll be back in just a moment. And junior doctors and their strike plans ahead of Christmas. Well, the British Medical Association, which is the union which represents doctors, has announced that there's going to be 5 days of strike action from the 17th of December until the 22nd of December. So the 5 days running up to Christmas. No fresh ballot action was called, and the proposals that the government have most recently offered have not been put to the members again. But the union still has the authority to call a strike, and it has done. And the reaction of health professionals, kind of those who administer the health service and the health secretary, have been pretty well furious, because they're saying this is a terrible time to be conducting industrial action, because it's in a way the busiest time for hospitals, where they're trying to maximise the number of people they can discharge so that they can be at home for Christmas with their loved ones, and instead of which, obviously, if you've got resident doctors out on strike, it's going to be much more difficult to get through all the different wards to see who is capable of going home for the Christmas period.
Yeah, the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has directed his ire very firmly at the BMA, the British Medical Association, which is this increasingly powerful union. He says that the association's going against the wishes of its members because most junior doctors, I think the latest poll suggested, they wouldn't actually support this strike. And Wes Streeting said the BMA seemed, his words, intent on causing pain to patients. Now, I think when you actually start talking to junior doctors, resident doctors, as they're now called, and I've been sort of speaking to a few sort of friends and children of friends, I think it's a much more complicated picture than just about pay. It's about placements. It's about whether British trained doctors are sort of being pushed back in the queue by those who are coming in from abroad.
So when you get higher up, like to become a registrar or a consultant.
Exactly. So one of the things that Wes Streeting hasn't actually been completely straight about is this whole question of allocating foundation places, training places. So there are junior doctors who want an immediate policy, which is implemented now, that UK trained doctors would have priority over overseas trained doctors. And Wes Streeting's made this sort of vague commitment to that, but it's not good enough. So I think it's not just about now and the pay, it's also about this sense of priority and direction of travel and where the commitment is to those who've been trained here as well.
But if we just zoom out from it being about doctors and to the wider public sector, I mean, doctors, resident doctors, have seen their pay rise by nearly 30% over the past 3 years, including by 22% under Labour, which was announced last year. And Labour took unbelievable flack from opposition parties saying, oh my God, you're just giving money away to these junior doctors. There's no productivity bonus. And the doctors have pocketed that money and still said it's not enough. And they say they need a further 26% pay increase in their pay to compensate for the erosion. And they've set this sort of date of 2008, which is when they say that pay declined. Obviously, if you go to another date, if you set the bar at 2015 and say what's happened to doctors' pay over the past 10 years, then under the CPI index, the Consumer Prices Index, then pay has gone up.
Well, let's talk to one of those resident doctors now, Dr. Callum Parr, Deputy Chair of the Resident Doctors Committee, who is joining us now, I think, from hospital. Are you right in hospital speaking to us, Callum?
In my middle of my shift, I've taken a break to be with you, so thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I don't know if you heard John just setting out. I guess the question is where you start to look at the back pay from, because if you did it from the last 3 years, then I guess resident doctors are seeing a pay rise of almost 30%. If you go back to 2008, obviously there is a much bigger gap. I mean, how would you tell the public that you have to start from 2008 rather than from, 2020?
Yeah, so I think when you look back at 2008, it was a time where the NHS was the envy of the world. We were ranking number one across a whole host of different statistics when it comes to delivering patient care. And I think it's important that we as doctors want to go back to that. We want to be delivering world-class care. To have that, you need the staff, you need the resident doctors who become the consultants and the GPs that can deliver that care. You mentioned pay over the last few years. It's really important to contextualise that was over multiple years on the background of a series of real terms pay cuts for doctors, real-time pay erosion. And the Secretary of State, Wes Streeting, had proposed another real terms pay cut next year. So when you're looking at the future of the healthcare service, the NHS, and what you want that to look like, you are not going to retain doctors in the health service and have those consultants to bring down the waiting list if you don't pay those doctors fairly. And I think a real-term pay cut sort of summarises what we perceive as his attitude towards this.
But you've had a 28.9% pay rise in the past couple of years. And as I say, over the past 10 years, according to the CPI, your pay has gone up in real terms. So in terms of other public sector, virtually everyone else in the public sector, doctors in the past decade have done way better than everyone else.
So I don't actually agree with that. So even when you look at CPI, that still hasn't kept up with inflation. And while the wider economy and areas of the private sector have actually seen
CPI is
real-term pay
inflation.
increases by CPI, then when you look at resident doctor pay, that hasn't kept track with CPI either. We have seen real terms cuts when it comes to our pay, whether you look at CPI or RPI. What's important to consider with RPI is that our student loans use RPI as well. So personally, I have £120,000 in student loans from medical school. Since I started full-time work as a doctor, working up to 72 hours a week, my student loans have gone up by £7,000. So I think that sort of gives you a good sense of why RPI is important, because if the government deems that important for our student loans, then we deem it important for our pay.
Can I just read a quote from Wes Streeting to you? After a 28.9% pay rise, the government offered to create more jobs and put money back into residents' doctors' pockets. The BMA rejected it out of hand, refused to put the offer to its members, blocking a better deal for doctors. Now, why haven't you gone back to your members?
So this is a dispute about pay and jobs. When it comes to jobs, we've seen this farcical situation where you have 30,000 fully qualified doctors in our health service applying to 10,000
Then why not
jobs.
ask your members?
Because this is a pay and jobs dispute. So there has to be movement on pay. When it comes to jobs, he hasn't moved far enough. So offering an extra 1,000 training places this year doesn't touch the sides of the crisis that we are seeing.
But there is a new offer. There is a new offer. You could have put it to your members. Your strike mandate runs out in January. So it looks like you've tried to get a 5-day strike in under the wire before your mandate expires.
So we don't see it that way at all. So our last strike ended on the 17th of November. We sent a letter to Wes Streeting that day, inviting him to come back to the negotiating table. We gave him 2 weeks to have those conversations and see if we could reach a deal. He didn't even send us a letter. So we are ready. We are willing to negotiate. We said that before the strikes, during the strikes, and after the strikes. That is an active choice by the Secretary of State not to make any improvement on the offer at all, or even just to have that conversation with us.
Callum, can I read you a message I was sent by a resident doctor who said, I'm supporting them, but it feels completely futile. I think they're just fitting in one more strike before the inevitable, read the ballot, and then no more strikes. I mean, is there a quiet acceptance that you fundamentally haven't got the public on your side for this one, and that whatever happens in the coming week will basically be a last gasp before you just have to reballot?
No, so I think what we have seen over this last couple of strikes is that strike action is the only thing that the Secretary of State is willing to listen to. So we did not call strike action when we ended our last strike in November. We gave 2 weeks of space for a discussion with the Secretary of State, and he chose not to even send us a reply to our letter. So for us, what choice do we have but to call strike action to force him back to the table? That is the point of strike action.
I mean, he doesn't sound at the moment, from the rhetoric he's using, like strike action will bring him back to the table. You know, we've read out some of his quotes. He holds the BMA responsible for causing pain to patients. It doesn't, I mean, certainly the language he's using right now, he doesn't sound like a man who's about to walk back and sit down with you.
I think it's important that he thinks about what the future of our healthcare service looks like. So we have
You don't think he does that?
times.
I mean, you don't think the Health Secretary does that?
So when we look at A&E waiting times, for example, so I'm a working doctor, I work in North London. I turn up to a shift where I admit patients from A&E who need medical admission. Often we are looking at hours that patients have waited over 12 hours. So last month, which we had no strikes in October, we have the data for October, there were over 160,000 patients waiting over 12 hours in A&E. At the same time, the competition ratios for specialty training places for doctors who want to train to become A&E specialists to bring down that waiting time was 14-1. So you have 13 doctors being turned away for every place that we have. That was over 4,000 doctors. Yeah. So actually, when you put that into context, so I don't agree about public support, because when I see patients in A&E and we have discussions and they understand that we've turned away 13 fully qualified doctors from those places, to them it doesn't make any sense either.
Yeah. Are you sure you've got public support on your side? I mean, all the polling evidence seems to suggest that the support for doctors, which may have been very, very considerable, and I think in most people's hearts, you know, you're not seen as a militant trade union, but you're becoming to be seen as increasingly militant.
I think that's because of where we find ourselves, where we have successive health secretaries who don't seem to be willing to address the problems that we're facing. We're crying out because we have a crisis. I worry every time that I come to work that I'm going to be doing the work of 2 doctors, because all it takes is for one of my colleagues to call in sick, and I don't begrudge them that. they call in sick and I'm automatically doing the work of 2 doctors. What we're asking for is to have more doctors in these training places so that we have better staff rotas. Ultimately, that is going to be better for patient care. And I think it's really important the Secretary of State addresses that. And so far, we just don't think that he has done that.
And Callum, just a kind of final thought. The cynicism that you're being accused of at calling this strike action at Christmas, when you need all the doctors around that are available to be on the wards, to working out who can be discharged so that they can spend Christmas at home with loved ones. And of course, that is going to be so much more difficult when all the resident doctors are on strike over the period when that would be happening.
Yeah, so I think it's important to point out that we're not striking over Christmas itself, and all of our action.
No, but
as
in
it
the
has
lead
been
up to it,
before,
when those decisions would be made, you are.
So as with all of our action, that is covered by senior colleagues, so specialist consultants who can make those discharge decisions. We talk about spending time with loved ones. You know, doctors will be working on Christmas Day. I'm personally working New Year's Eve. I'm working the night shift. Doctors sacrifice their time around Christmas, on Christmas Day itself, to be there to deliver the care that we always do for patients. This strike was completely avoidable if the Secretary of State had come back and even replied to our letter. We have told him that we're willing to look at an offer that goes over multiple years. That would take strike action off the table, not only for December, but for multiple years to come. We think that is a common sense approach for the Secretary of State to take, but it's one that he's not taken at all.
Do you think he will?
I hope so. And we're taking strike action because we see this as the only option to get him to come to the table to address it. We think we're being really reasonable. We gave us the time to have those conversations and he didn't contact us at all. I don't see how this is anyone else's fault other than his.
Dr. Callum Parr, thank you very much, and thanks for speaking to us on your break. Appreciate that. Before we go, a moment of calm reflection from Donald Trump's security chief, Kristi Noem, who has just put a post out saying she wants a travel ban on every country that is flooding our nation with killers, leeches and entitlement junkies.
Yes, that's kind of a pretty big kind of
Net.
sweeping net. So broadly speaking, foreigners, we don't want you in America. I'd like to know which countries, you know, because obviously we've had the odd fraudster that's gone from Britain to America. So are we not welcome? And where do you draw the line? It seems that America is really saying we don't want anyone. Kind of anyone from abroad, we really don't want you. So the background is that there were 2 National Guardsmen and Guardswoman, who was shot last week in Washington, D.C., not that far from the White House, one of whom has died. And the person who is accused of the murder is an Afghan national who had been granted asylum you know, when Biden was president. So it's got the added piquancy that, you know, Kristi Noem and Donald Trump are saying this is all because Joe Biden let in all these people unvetted into the country, and that is why we've got this problem now.
Yeah, so Donald Trump came out straight away and said no more people coming in from third world countries. And Kristi Noem has sort of followed up on that by saying our forefathers built this nation on blood, sweat and the unyielding love of freedom, not for foreign invaders to slaughter our heroes, suck dry our hard-earned tax dollars or snatch the benefits owed to Americans. We don't want them, not one. They've got the World Cup next summer.
Exactly. And that's the interesting thing, when you would expect tens of thousands of people to be travelling to America.
Are you a leech?
And are you a leech? Are you a parasite? Are you a benefit scrounger?
Yeah.
Are you from Africa? Well, probably an awful lot of people will be from Africa coming to the United States. Are you from Latin America? Yep, there'll be a lot of people from Latin America.
Do you think there'll be a lot of empty seats? Seriously?
I think that there'll be an awful lot of people who will be put off. And I'm sure you hear it as well, Emily, too, of people who are planning to go to America, who are scrubbing their social media accounts of anything that is in any way controversial, who are fearful that they won't get through the border crossings because, of what they might have posted before.
I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? There are 48 teams, 48 countries, in other words, coming to the World Cup. I'd love to see Trump running his fingers down that list of 48, telling us which was a third world country and which wasn't. Because, what happens? Like the squad's banned? The fans are banned? Anyone from those countries is banned? What is a third world country in his eyes? Yeah. Right?
And
could be very small. Could be a niche World Cup.
Or it could be, if you're from one of the first world countries, very easy to get tickets because there might be an awful lot of half-empty stadiums.
Yes.
We'll see you tomorrow.
We'll be back with the News Agency USA then too.
Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.